All right, class. We're on to our fifth section of the lecture. So we're just looking at painting, and the painting we were looking at was actually a copy of a painting on the mosaics. And it's next up is pottery, but it's connected to painting in that most remaining Greek painting, in quotes, is on the pottery. The pottery was made out of terracotta, which actually means cooked earth. Terracotta means cooked earth. You're going to want to know that. And there were different styles. The first archaic style was actually black figure, which is black figures on a pot painted with clay slip, which is liquid clay. And then the details were added by carving with sharp lines to expose the orange clay later. And it was fired in multiple stages. So this is not black figure. Black figure looks like that. We'll look more at that piece. And then red figure, which are these ones, are like late archaic to classical. So you get the figures being red. Opposite, basically. The clay figures are the red and the black background. And then in the Hellenistic period, we get a totally white ground, which is the surface is totally white, and there's a wash of white slip over the whole thing, and the figures are in black and additional colors. So slip is liquid clay. It's like clay that's been added a lot of water to, but it can have color to the clay. Nowadays, they even add other type of pigments to it to give it different colors. There's a lot of different shapes associated with Greek pottery, and they have names. Amphoras, neck amphora, another type of amphora, hydras for water. These are for storing all different types of wet and dried goods, water, pouring jugs. Craters are for mixing water and wine. That's how they drank their wine. And then kylix is a drinking cup. So you're going to want to know about these. The hydra is the three-handled jar. That one, amphora, you're going to want to know about that. A kylix, the oninoke for pouring wine. So you have some of those in your vocab lists that I gave out to you guys. And they had very specific types of pottery for specific purposes, which is pretty interesting. The next piece we're going to look at is an amphora. So it's functional, that ceramics is functional, but it's also decorative. Was it actually used? I would say a lot of times really decorative pieces aren't actually used, but they have the possibility of the function of them. The artist was Exekias, Exekias. That's a bad pronunciation in Greek. He was the potter and he painter. He signed his work. So again, we have a era where the artist is important so that we know who the artist is. This is black figure style from the archaic era, and it's called Achilles and Ajax playing a board game. Sometimes they'll say playing chess on some of them. It's 2 feet tall and it's made out of the cooked earth terracotta. What do you see in the middle? I would imagine you're thinking, okay, there's two guys and they're holding their hands down on a table. They have some kind of weaponry, spears, and they look like they have helmets and some kind of armaments on them. Their feet are bare, and the curve of their backs sort of matches the edge of the pottery. So it's interesting they've echoed it. Over here you have another idea of a helmet and a shield, and another shield. So they're warriors. It's a black figure. You see that we have the frontal eye still, that we had a lot of pieces. This is an older era, so they haven't gone to the eye being as realistic. Still a frontal eye on the side face. It's a twisted sort of perspective still going on. Their hands And the figures gaze down at this table here where they're playing a board game. They're simplified figures. There's not a lot of them, but look at how simple they are. They're defined through line work, carving into the black slip. And these words that you see around here are actually connected to the game. They're throwing dice during a break in the Trojan War. And these are connected to dice throws. There's also names of the warriors that appear on the base. So these guys were famous warriors in this story of the Trojan War and the Iliad. And you see, like, they got into a lot of patterning because they can carve, and there's like stylization in the beards and the cloaks they're wearing, and a lot of detail is thrown to that carving into it. The black slip to reveal the clay below. There's the name of the potter down below. So really, really well crafted base. And you can see also this patterning is around the handle and the band at the top here and below. And it's really much, the whole focal point of the pot is about them and this story of taking a break in the Trojan War. They're on opposite sides, but they're playing a game. Okay. Another piece of painting slash pottery is the subject of this is the death of the children in Niobe. The artist is painter is Niobed, so it's kind of confusing because Niobe is the central theme and Niobed is the painter. You'll see on there's people with bows, and they appear to be slaying other people. Pretty violent. You can see a detail here. The fallen people have arrows sticking out of them. And you have a lot of detail. You have this sort of crown on this head. That's because these are gods and goddess and god. This is Artemis and Apollo. They're slaying Niobe's kids, because she bragged about how many she had to Leto, who is their mother. She had 2 kids, Artemis and Apollo. So we got this story where pride comes before the fall. So Niobe has a bunch of kids, and she brags to Leto about how many kids she has. So the 2 kids of Leto, they get pissed off about it. They're gods, they're god and goddess. And Leto was a Titaness, and Zeus had these kids. So she's a Titaness and a god. Zeus had the kids Apollo and Artemis. So they're pissed off about it, and they go and they have their heyday. And pride comes before a fall is the learning lesson of this, because if you bragging about how many kids you have, then the fall happens. Pretty brutal, really. Apollo here is the god of reason, the sun, music, the muses, and prophecy. He has a symbol of a lyre. See this right here, harp is a lyre. And Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, wild animals, childbirth, and virginity. She's a fertility goddess, basically. And her symbol is actually a bow. So she's using the bow, and he has a bow, but this is his symbol. Her symbol is a bow. She's another one of the fertility goddesses that we'll see. On the other side, we have kind of an interesting scene, which is like Greek heroes, including Hercules and Athena. Hercules and Athena helping out. There's Athena, Hercules, helping out the heroes. So they're kind of helping and standing witness to what's happening on the other side, I guess you could say. There's this band of decoration around it. This is not black figure, this is the red figure, so it's a classical era. And you can see in the figures that their eyes are not frontal, they look realistic in that they're actually profile eyes. And there's something of a landscape where these people are draping on, and the figures are being shown through carving away that black slip and revealing the red figure. So a lot more detail happening here, a lot more realism, a lot more weight to the figures. They're lounging in space. Even though there's not a sense of the ground, we feel like they're more anatomically accurate and realistic. And a lot of detailing in the carving of these bands of geometric patterning. But the whole focal point of it is really this scene here. That's like a moralizing story on your creator. Okay, we're going to look now at some architecture. And we're going to start talking about the Acropolis of Athens and this famous building at the top of it. My videos are kind of need to be 15 minutes long at a time because of the program I'm using, so we'll have to stop before we finish off everything about the Parthenon, which is this building here at the top. The Acropolis is this hill over Athens, and it means high place or upper city. So there was a patron of this. His name was Pericles. We saw his bust earlier when I compared it to Alexander the Great. And he ordered this area to be rebuilt after it was destroyed in the Persian Wars. Now we're going back to the classical era here, and the start of it in some ways, and kind of the era where the Greeks started to think of themselves as the preeminent people of all time. So he was a beloved elected commander-in-chief of Athens in the Golden Age. He had been democratically elected 14 to 15 times, so he was really, really, really highly regarded. And he was the person in charge of the rebuild. He was the patron over it. And he hired Phidias as the architect and sculptor to do the rebuilding. Now, it was a public place for religious ceremonies, so it was an important place for them and their culture and their ideas about themselves as people. And they really, really wanted to depict themselves as we talked about this a lot of times, the preeminent people of the world. Everyone else was a barbarian. They were the best. So they made this up on a hill, like the mountain of their god. So remember we talked about Zeus living on the mountaintop, so they also made their temple. So there's an echoing or relationship between the city and this mountain over it and where they built this as a public place for their religious ceremonies. You would enter through the Propylaea and from the west and emerge to the east. The largest structure in the whole thing is this structure on the top, the Parthenon, which we're going to look at in quite a lot of detail because it's a very important building for architectural history. This is sort of a recreation of how it would have been. You come through the Propylaea, there's a temple over here of Athena Nike, there's other buildings on the top, but this most important building, the Parthenon, it depicts a lot of things about Athena, who is the patron goddess of the city of Athens. So Athens is named after Athena. So of course this will be a very important building, the temple to Athena. And there's another temple, Athena Nike, which is a goddess of Athena associated with victory, the winged victory, like we've talked about before. Old drawings of it. This kind of just points it out to you again. The Propylaea, the entrance, the temple of Athena Nike, the Erechtheion, and then the Parthenon on top. So next time we're going to start talking about the classical orders. I also posted a video that I really want you to watch from Khan Academy. It's 11 minutes about the classical orders and the difference between them. The Doric, which we'll see mostly those in Iconic used on the Parthenon, seen by the flat fluting and the scroll work on Iconic. And then the Corinthian has these acanthus leaves on the top of it, like a leaf pattern, and that's something we'll see a lot of. So I'll see you next time.